It'll be fun.
All right.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Thanks a lot for coming in, man. This is the first recording in my studio here in Cincinnati, so it's good to have you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
All right. This
Yeah.
is Quentin Davis, and you are with who you're with?
So we started a company. It's called Wealthwise Financial Group.
Wealthwise Financial Group. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, though. I appreciate it. Just to be able to carry on this conversation I know we had previously in other places. Thanks.
Yeah, you did an interview with me, what, about maybe 3 months ago about real estate,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you posted that article and got some attention on the article, so that was cool.
Yeah. And it's nice to take these relationships and use the sphere of influence that we have
Right.
and let people know your story. And so that was my goal, especially using our platform, just to let people know who you are, how you came into real estate, and really what does it look like for you right now. And hopefully that's what the article did, and for
Yeah, I
people
think it
to
was a
read it.
good introduction about what I do and give some people an idea of what I do and what they can maybe do if they wanted to
Mhm.
and how to reach out. Yeah, it was good. I liked it.
Awesome. Yeah.
Uh, so let's get some of your story. You,
Sure.
you got my story. Let's get your story.
Yeah.
Um, let's go back just to how you grew up.
Yeah. My parents grew up very rural out in the country in southern Ohio. My father and comes from a contracting family. He was a fellow contractor. His father was a contractor and basically was raised on a farm, took some of those skills into his profession of building, contracting. And so I was raised by my father was a builder, my mother was a social worker. Early on in her career, she worked for family services, which goes into areas where maybe troubled households and maybe assesses the situation and maybe places children somewhere else. So she grew up, I grew up within regards to that, helping people, building, figuring out how to make things work and inside of relationships and also the building aspect or the farming aspect as well. So she also, my mom was in that sort of field for a little while. Then she went to senior citizens. It was a little less volatile or emotionally draining for her, just because if you have to go in and take a child away from their home, it's a sad situation. So she necessarily didn't want to do that. So I grew up with my mother, a social worker, my father, a builder. So I just learned from both of them, the best of both, right? Having compassion, but also figuring out how to get things done. Because my father was an independent contractor. So if he didn't go to work or he didn't complete a job or a task, then he didn't get paid. So I spent many years as a young kid going to work with my father during the summers because we didn't go to school. So I'd go to my brother and we would sometimes go to work with my dad. And so we would just pick up trash around the job site. We'd go and just see what everybody else is doing. If it's roofing, we might be on a roof that day.
Uh,
Or if it's looking at, I remember one time he was working on a school in Maysville. So we went to work with him during that time and figured out how to build and what it all really entailed, the building aspect of things. So I always really enjoyed maybe tearing things apart and putting things back together. So I think that maybe came from my father so much than anybody else. So I actually had those opportunities to do that. And being really in a rural position, there's not much to do in the country if you can't self-occupy. So if you go and try to do something, it's either you're getting in trouble or you're tearing something apart that you probably shouldn't have taken apart, but then you're trying to put it back together so your parents don't find out. So definitely, I would say that my childhood was pretty typical, though, of most kids, hanging out with friends. And I grew up close to where you grew up too,
oh
Lake
yeah,
Winoka.
Lake Winoka.
Yeah, that's right, Lake Winoka. Give them a shout out. It was very much a small community.
It's a great place to grow up.
Yeah, so much to do. Play basketball, hang out with your friends, communal areas, swimming pools during the summer. So there's a lot of things that you can do, and a lot of people know where that's at. And your parents, on the one hand, know that there's that safety and security of that community. So it's to get into the community, you have to have a pass, or someone has to leave you a pass to get into the community.
Right.
So it's almost like a border around your living neighborhood. So it's nice to have that as a parent and as a kid. You can just hang around in the lake and you can tell your parents you rode your bike around
Yeah, you could
Lake
ride your
Winoka
bike
Drive.
everywhere. You
Yeah,
didn't have to worry. The traffic was minimal, so you didn't
yeah,
have to worry too much about traffic. You could ride your bike or run or walk anywhere you wanted to go, to the pool, to the beach,
yeah,
everywhere. So yeah, and growing up there was a blessing,
yeah.
looking back.
Yeah, I think we probably, at the time, we didn't know how well we had it.
Uh-uh.
Just all the opportunities that we could use and still be with our friends, just maybe ride a bike, maybe, I don't know, 30 to 40 minutes and be at their house. So it was a really good opportunity. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed my childhood, and there was a lot for me to do in that area. I always tell my wife, I said, you grew up in Cincinnati, you had so many opportunities. I said, our high school didn't even have a football team. And they look at me like I'm crazy. I said, it was really like you had basketball, right? Baseball, cross country, track,
Soccer.
soccer didn't even really come in. It was a few years before I went to high school, I think. And so there weren't a lot of like athletic opportunities like you would have here in Cincinnati, which is just different. So yeah, I would say that I grew up pretty standard kid in a very rural community, but also had the option of, like you said, growing up in Lake Winoka, also had that opportunity as well.
Yeah, but having the opportunity to work with your dad on those construction sites was had to be very valuable just to build a work ethic and to see what it takes to succeed. You know what I mean? To see things aren't just built by accident. They take a lot of planning, a lot of work, and a lot of organization. Just that being exposed to those things at a young age had to be super valuable. It wasn't something that I was really exposed to at a young age, or really at all until after high school, exposed to any kind of entrepreneurial mindset.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think sometimes I feel like I'm overconfident in things and especially my abilities because I've might have seen my father do it one or two times. But like you said, building anything, it's all about the details.
Hmm.
And really, if you boil it down, life's all about the details. We see something going up or like a bridge going up or a house going up. It seems very simplistic on the onset, but realistically, there's so many details that are moving that you might not know about, or things that you don't want to forget that actually pertain to the larger infrastructure. And so I take that to life is where I might not know, but I want to go and find that person that has the ability to maybe have that professional experience to then maybe build back into me so that I don't make those mistakes. I usually tell my kids, you're going to learn the easy way or you're going to learn the hard way. And so the easy way is you listen to someone else's wisdom, or the hard way is you don't listen to wisdom and you're going to find out and you're going to have to and pay for it
Fail,
after those repercussions. Yeah.
fail forward if you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm guilty of that. I definitely try to do things myself and learn how to do things myself more than I try to reach out to the experts. Well, I can't say I try to reach out to experts, but sometimes it's so hard to find them.
Yeah.
You're getting people to call you back or getting people to do what they say they're going to do. That can be challenging. So a lot of times I would just spend time on YouTube and figure out how to do things myself. And man, I've learned how not to do a lot of things.
That's wisdom. Like you can going forward now. And maybe you're someone that I'm going to contact to help me to speak some wisdom into my life for things that I need to do because I think that's important to have for sure.
Yeah.
So,
So that's your childhood. What kind of goals did you have in high school? What did you think you wanted to do after high school?
so I think for high school, I actually went to college initially to start off to be a teacher. I thought, hey, I love kids. I love maybe teaching. I feel like I had a skill set in like math. I love math. And it just was one of those things that I felt like I wanted to do. I would say in high school, my high school was, I just wanted to get by. I never really studied a lot. The first class I ever had to study in was chemistry. So I would do fine on all the other classes and all the other grades, and I think I was on the honor roll. But when I got to chemistry, I got my first like D, and I'm like, what's going on? Like, I have to study for this, and so I think it was Mr. Walters at the time.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, this stuff doesn't make sense. I know I can just go and sit down any other math class and just do the work and I just get good grades. But when it come to like atomic numbers, the weight of molecules and all that stuff, I had no idea. So that was the first time that actually had to really focus and really work, and then I actually enjoy that. So I thought, you know what, I could probably teach this, or I could teach. So I could be a teacher and teach students about maybe chemistry or mathematics, and then I would be able to have my summers off, have that flexibility to still do the things that I wanted to do as the summers were off for student or for teachers and students. However, when I went to college, God had different plans for me. I was in 2 years just taking general ed classes and studying to be a teacher. I had to do student teaching. So I quickly realized that classes in the schools I went in, student teaching while I was down here in Cincinnati at Cincinnati Christian University, they were different from the classes that I had experienced maybe in Brown County. It was a little different. And so I decided, you know what, this isn't probably what I want to do. I feel like I was being tugged into more entrepreneurial ideologies at that time. I had people that were mentoring me in school. They were business professors. And I'm like, you know what, I actually feel like my numbers, my strength in numbers and ability, I could probably see that in finance.
Mm.
This story kind of backs up a little bit to where I'm at today and why I'm a financial advisor and why I like numbers. When we were at school, Eastern, I was about 14 years old. I was in the library. They had a few magazines over on the side of as soon as you walk in, you had a little corral area where you could sit down. And I picked up a magazine. It might have been a Wire magazine or a PC magazine. I can't really remember. And it had in there a article titled about a Roth IRA.
Okay.
And I'm like, what's a Roth IRA? I'm gonna figure this out. And as a kid, I was waiting for the bell to ring because you get library time. So I read through the article.
When you were 14.
Yeah, 14 at school, and I'm like, oh, a Roth IRA seems great. You put money in, and it's already been taxed, money that you have. It grows income tax free, the compounding of interest. And then when you pull it out, I don't have to pay taxes on it. So as a kid, I'm like, just think about the years. And they had an example, and I remember in the book, if you put X amount away and if it compounded at a certain percentage, what it would be at the end. And this interests me.
That's very, I didn't learn about that until I was probably 25.
Yeah, well, and honestly, it just happenstance. That's how it happened. It's very serendipitous because if I didn't go to the library that day, I might not have even read that article, right? And might not have even figured out what a Roth IRA is until years later.
And it changed your life.
Changed my life. So what ended up happening was my grandparents, they raised tobacco out in Brown County. They gave my brother and I a little bit of tobacco base, meaning we were able to raise some crop and we raised it. And then when we went to go and sell it, my brother and I would split the profits. They asked us what we wanted to do with it. About that age, I put in the money, I got the money, and then I told them I wanted to put it in a Roth IRA. They had no idea what that was.
Wow.
So my father went and found somebody in a local community that was able to set me up a Roth IRA account. And then I started investing there at 14 years old. And so that is which kind of led me to where I am today. But it was that moment of reading that magazine, being able to have the fortitude to actually stay the course and realizing like the big a difference it could mean and it could contribute to my life.
For sure, man.
So
Starting at 14, that's incredible. I've got a Roth IRA that I opened when I was probably 30, and imagine if I started that at 14, what a difference it would be.
yeah, it is, and I think that's super important just to educate. Like I
Yeah,
said,
nobody taught, there was no class on that in high school.
no, and I don't even know if I think we had correct me if I'm wrong. It was like an economics class or not an economics class, home. Was it home econ or it was something to do with about things around the house, like where you balance your checkbooks and things like that,
I think
shopping.
I took that in eighth grade.
Was that in eighth grade?
I think so.
Okay, but it wasn't about investing. It was about balancing a checkbook
Yeah,
or like budgeting, which is important,
sure.
but there's a bigger picture. And I think maybe when we were growing up, it wasn't as important as it is today, just because we see like where the economy is and financially what that means for us.
I
As
think it's just as important. It just wasn't as culturally available. Like even I don't think my mom knows what a Roth IRA is. I'm sure my dad probably does, but it just wasn't something that was ever taught. So even probably a lot of our teachers didn't know what it was.
And I think it was right around when that article came out, it actually was established. I
Okay.
can't remember what year it was, but I think I was right about 14.
But there were IRAs before that
Yeah,
as
there were
well.
IRAs before that,
Which is,
and certainly other investment plans that you could do
hmm.
for sure. But yeah, it's just not one of those things that people have talked about, or like you said, know about. Um, so yeah, it's pretty incredible just what knowledge can do and what reading can propel you to even investigate and learn more about.
Yeah,
So
that's incredible.
great.
So you're in college and you decide to go into finance.
Yeah, so as in college, went into business. That was the closest thing to go into business.
Cincinnati
Yeah,
Christian.
Cincinnati Christian University. It's closed as of today.
Oh,
Yeah, it's no longer around. But yeah, was there, studied. Actually, what I ended up doing was I had so many credits from education and it was able to translate into psychology. More of the credits overlapped. So I went ahead and just finished a psychology degree. It didn't take any longer. And then I realized I was going back to school and maybe to go to grad school, but I was able to just spend like another year to get business classes out of the way. So I spent 5 years to go ahead and get my business degree also.
Hmm.
So I graduate when you're at Cincinnati Christian University, you actually had a double major. You majored in biblical studies and also whatever core competency that you had.
Okay.
So I had a biblical studies degree and a psychology degree. And then I realized I could do one more year and I could get a business degree. So I went ahead and did that. Then I was employed by the university, then went ahead and worked there and got my grad school paid for from there. And it's pastoral leadership. And yeah, from those, backing up a little bit more before I talk about grad school, when I was in undergrad, I was still investing in my Roth. I picked up a job to do valet parking, and I was an RA in the dorm, and I cleaned the bathrooms. So I had three jobs that I was working, and people would come to me and they were like, "You're investing." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm investing. How do I do that?" And I showed them how to set it up, and I said, "You need to get another job because if you set up a retirement account and you're getting statements at your house, your parents are going to wonder what's up because you're taking out money to pay for your college and you're not working necessarily to help pay for college, but you're putting money in an investment account. So you need to have some skin in the game." And so a couple of my people that are on the floor with and in the dorm, I helped them start up a Roth IRA. They came and were do valet parking with me and got
Okay.
other jobs to help fund that. And then what ended up happening was they'd get statements at the house, their parents would be like, "What are you doing?" Like, "I'm putting money in a Roth IRA. It's a great thing." And they're like, "What? Who taught you how to do that?" So then I would go home with them
Wow.
and their parents would ask. And so then I would help them. And so by just happenstance, I didn't know that this was a job. Right. I
Right.
didn't know necessarily this is what you could do as a financial advisor. So I was giving them assistance and help and spurred on from there, like their friends and other referrals and things like that. It wasn't necessarily a referral because I wasn't making any money off of
You're
it.
just helping
I
people
was
out
just helping
because
people out.
you knew it was a great idea and you were just spreading the word of
E-
what people can
Exactly.
do. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So then I realized that was great, and I love that. But I figured I wanted to go back to school and just get my master's degree. And since I worked at the school, it was free, and so it's hard to pass up a master's degree
A
that's
free master's
yeah,
degree.
free. Yeah.
Sure.
And so that's what I ended up doing. And I also worked at the university in their admissions department. So I stayed there, worked till I got my master's degree. Then for a short time, there was some turbulation going on at the school. So I went to a different school just to figure out what it is that I wanted to do and where my sort of ship was headed in that direction. I left the other school in their admissions department. I was the undergrad admissions director, and then I wanted to go work for a financial firm. And to take your test and your financial qualifications, you have to be appointed with a financial firm. So I went and I was here in Cincinnati. I was hired at Western and Southern. So they paid for me to get all of my licensing. They paid for me to basically get all my license. They paid for me to go to classes. They did everything. They were really great about that. And so I was able to transition from higher ed to the financial world in a pretty swift motion.
Wow.
And I went from there and moved up and then was working for which Touchstone Investment Firms, which is another arm of Western and Southern. And so then I would talk to advisors all around the country in a certain area because I was the internal wholesaler. And so the more that I thought about it and the more that I spoke to the advisors, I'm like, "Uh, I can do this. Like I'm educating them."
Mm.
So going back to the teaching aspect that I love, I went to the internal sales position and realized, hey, like I can do this. Like I'm telling them how to do their jobs. Why don't I go ahead and try and do this?
What kind of sales? Selling what?
So basically, whatever products that Western and Southern and their parent companies or the subsidy companies had,
Hmm.
we would talk to advisors and sell them. If that was a life insurance policy, if that was mutual funds, if
Okay.
that was an annuity, we would basically communicate what's the best use for these potential annuities or the best use for these potential mutual funds or things like that.
Yeah.
And so I talked to the advisors and they talked to us about cases and case previews and we'd help them with their decision making.
Okay. So you are talking as a salesperson selling these different products for Western and Southern, talking to advisors who are advising their clients on what products they might want to buy.
Correct,
Okay.
correct. And sometimes they would come to me and say, "Hey, here's what I got. What should I do?"
Hmm.
And then you're basically, "This is what I would do. This
So
is
you're
how I would
advising the
do it."
advisors
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Obviously, we didn't have all the details of that
of
particular
that
client,
client.
but based on the information that they told us, we would give best case scenarios or best recommendations possible with the information that we were given.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, so and then once I was there, I realized that I could do this on my own. I really set myself up pretty well at the time because when I was at Cincinnati Christian University, I purchased a condo and it was very cheap. And I think we spoke about before, it was like 25 grand. And so it was a two bedroom, one bath. Um, this was positioned when I was in grad school. I needed a place to live. I didn't want to pay rent because I felt like that paying rent would have been just like throwing my money away.
Yeah.
And so I bought this condo. It was a two bedroom, two bath for 25 grand. And then I had a roommate that I also rented it out to while I lived in that. And I'm like, this is great. This is phenomenal. I can walk to work, not have to pay about it. I have an asset that's appreciating because during that time it was still pretty rough just with the economy and things like that.
This was
Um,
2009 or 10.
yeah, somewhere around there. Yep. I kept that. I still have the condo
So
today.
right, it was probably right after the real estate
Yeah,
crash.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, where and the thing was it was really hard to find someone to loan just 25 grand.
Hmm.
I'm still in college. I don't really have a lot of assets, but I found somebody to lend me 25 grand, but I was able to with renting out the room, paying that, it was paying the mortgage was super cheap and my renter was paying the mortgage. There's a lot of good positions,
Sure.
but during the same time, a little after the grad school, we decided, me and my brother, to buy another house. We figured, oh, this would be great. To buy another house in northern Kentucky for college students at NKU. So we went ahead and bought another house, and then had a house full of girls come in and move there, live at the house. They went to NKU, and that sort of was another way that I segued into real estate, but also investing, asset appreciation.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, so that kind of, I might be jumping all over the place because it happened all together in one when I look back at it, but it's all at certain
Yeah, you were talking
times.
about just how you set yourself up. So
Y-
these are the things that you were setting up at the time.
Yeah. So, yeah, and so that's what I did, and it was a great purchase for me at the time because it for rent, and then
And the thing is, it eliminates your largest expense.
that's right,
We call that a house hack.
yeah,
And that's what I'm doing here, where you buy a property and you rent it out to people to basically cover or almost cover your mortgage. So it eliminates your largest expense and allows you to save that money and put it to other things like investments.
yeah, super smart. I think back when I did it, I didn't realize that's what I was doing.
Right.
I wasn't giving real estate a thought as like, oh, I'm the house hacker. I'm going to invest time.
Hmm.
I talked about you learn things the easy way or the hard way. That's probably what it was a hard way of learning, but it turned out it working in my favor, which I didn't even realize
Yeah.
how well it worked in my favor. Because there's a lot of things that were moving at the time. The economy, right? The just where I was at in college, still in grad school, still wasn't making a large sum of money, but I was working, had a job, had health insurance. I needed a place to live.
And your living expenses were super low.
Super
So,
low and grad school. So I didn't have a lot of extra time to do additional things. But I knew that by just living and doing these small things and living within my means and having to rent out my room, that I could save money in the long term and also would be beneficial for me later in life. So yeah,
awesome. That's great.
crazy.
I accidentally fell into real estate, not in a similar way, but I bought a house and started renting out to people for different reasons, but worked out a similar way where yeah, you have this asset that now it's appreciating, and then 10 years later you have it's worth way more, and it's something that you just accidentally did almost. So I know the feeling of
Now,
kind of.
what was your first house or what was your first
First house was
taste?
in the one in Newport on Aspen.
Okay.
So yeah, I bought that when I was living in Louisville because the company I worked for at the time would pay me a living away from home allowance of $2,000 a month if I had a home that I was living away from.
Okay.
So I'm living in Louisville and paying rent down there, but if I have a home that I'm living away from, then they're going to pay me $2,000 a month. okay, I'm gonna go buy a house in Cincinnati or Newport, Kentucky. And I had several friends who were going to Northern Kentucky University at the time. So I bought the house and let them live there. And they were paying just enough to cover the mortgage at the
Right.
time. And I had never even thought about being a landlord. I didn't know anything about being a landlord. I just knew that I wanted this extra $2,000 a month.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that it was good to have a house and a place that I could at least crash when I came up to visit.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so that was 15 years ago.
So it all worked in your favor, and now it's spiraled into what you have now.
Yeah, now I just turned it into a midterm rental. I furnished the whole thing and I'm renting it out by the month as a furnished unit and yeah, it's doing pretty well.
It's crazy to think about the foreknowledge. Like obviously, when I purchased my condo, I didn't think it was going to be like a passive income option for me. Like
Right.
I just thought I needed a place to live, and it was fairly inexpensive, close to where I was wanting to be.
Hmm.
And now, look, years later, I still have it. It's paid off. It's producing income, right? Have a renter in there. For you, you wanted to get that extra $2,000 a month. It made sense. You just wanted to make sure that your mortgage was covered.
Right.
Now you have such an appreciating asset. How many years have you owned that house?
It was 2011, so I guess 14 years.
So 14 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, almost half of a 30-year term.
Yeah, it's pretty much doubled in value.
Yeah. Man, that was a heck of a purchase.
Yeah, I've refinanced it since then, so I still have more than 15 years left to pay on it, but no, I got the interest rate down to 2.75%.
Yeah,
So,
that's wild.
yeah,
That's a success story for sure.
it is. But the thing is, a lot of people don't even give that a thought. They'll just go pay rent somewhere and not know that they have an option.
Yeah.
They'll go waste, like you said, throw the money down the drain, paying
Hmm.
rent to somebody, and not realize that they could buy something
Hmm.
and acquire property and take ownership control of it, and it's going to set them up for success in the future.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know if it's like just not knowing or just think of how we talked about our parents maybe not knowing what a Roth IRA was. Is it they've not been shown or they've not been told, educated?
Or they think it's way too much work, or they think that it's just something that other people do, that's something that maybe they won't qualify for.
Hmm.
But it's definitely lack of knowledge is I think the main problem.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think we can almost say that about almost anything.
Yeah.
Lack of knowing, knowledge. I think that's why it's also important to read, right? Be able to read and or else find someone that can speak some wisdom into your life.
Reading, but really, I do love to read, but podcasts really
Yeah.
changed my life. I've learned so much from listening to podcasts in the last 8 years
Okay.
that I would have never, or audiobooks, which is the same thing as reading. But I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to start this podcast is because I've learned so much and I just want to be able to share some of the things that I've learned with my small circle
Sure.
and and then be able to have conversations with people like you
Yeah.
and absorb some of your experience and knowledge and share that with people also.
Mhm. I think it's super important because I never want to be the smartest person in the room. I want to find the smart people who have had experience so that I can feed off of them, so that they can manifest things inside me that I know that I can do. I always think about this is just something funny. The Declaration of Independence was just written on a piece of paper. Just a piece of paper can change the course of history.
Yeah.
So just an idea, just things that wisdom that you put down on a piece of paper can change anyone's outcome and just a little bit of thought. So I think that's super important. And especially you listening to the podcast, reading, and finding those people that have done it already. They're speaking wisdom into you and will forever change your life. Yeah, it's all about the details, right?
Right.
All about
Going
the
back to that.
details.
Yeah, I mean, that's the most valuable thing is being able to spend time with the people who are actually doing things like that you want to do.
Hmm.
You can read and learn a lot from reading. You can listen to them talk, but if you can get in a situation where you're actually learning directly from people, and that's the most challenging. That's something that I haven't been able to do as much as I would like to do.
Sure. Yeah.
But
Yeah, no, I think I introduced you to a couple people that kind of run the same track that you are,
mhm.
but maybe there's some other people that I might know that to introduce you to.
Yeah, be
So,
happy to meet them.
um, but yeah, for sure.
All right, let's get on to some other things here. How have your financial goals changed over the years as you've gone through this progress and
Yeah,
started your own kind of entrepreneurial story?
Yeah, I would probably say when I started the Roth IRA, I had no idea. Like I didn't have a goal. I just knew that this is what you do or this is what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
So I didn't necessarily have a goal in mind. When I went to college, my goal was to not assume a lot of debt. So I didn't want to necessarily take out a lot of student loans.
Hmm.
So I worked summers. I did some concrete work for Harold Dorsey for a few summers, and they paid very well for a college kid and worked through that process to save up money for school. I also, like I said, was an RA. I did additional things for the school so that my bills would not be so expensive. I didn't always have a meal plan because it costs more money. So all the thoughts in college, it was definitely, I didn't want,
Saving.
yeah, savings. I didn't want to take on debt because I knew it had to be paid back.
Hmm.
So that was the goal. And at the time, I'm like seeing all of my friends, like they go on like summer excursions or like service learning trips, and they're paying $2,000 or $3,000 for these, buying a new MacBook Pro, and I'm just like, huh, I've got a desktop and I've got everything. I'm like, yeah, I don't want to take on debt because I knew that it had to be paid back. And so at that time, I didn't necessarily want to do that. So it changed then not having debt. Then when I was in grad school, it was trying to accumulate assets without having to pay for assets, right?
Okay.
So accumulating more assets to not have money coming, like disposable income coming from my pocket to pay for those. And so that's where the house came in, where we wanted to buy the house in northern Kentucky and rent it out.
Hmm.
Because basically, we would take in their rent, pay the mortgage, but still have a nice chunk left over. And we build up kind of emergency fund if anything were to happen. There weren't a lot of things that were to happen at that house. But what we end up doing a few years we got it. I think it was maybe 3 years, 3 or 4 years. We owned the house, but then we ended up selling it for. That's when the market ended up going back up,
Hmm.
and then we sold it in a nice chunk. So at that point, it was accumulating assets and things like that. And then when I was at Western and Southern and I started my financial career, my goal was to pay down as much debt as possible because I knew at that time I was wanting to go out and be an independent financial advisor. But I know that in order to do that, you have to have low expense, like a lot of low expenses, because basically you're starting with zero income.
Hmm.
You're going out and you're having to build your own book of business to even have a livelihood.
So you're wanting to reduce your basically your overhead costs, your living expenses, get your cost of living down to low as you can, so you have less risk to start this.
100%. Yep. I worked weekends. I helped my brother Jeremy owns an IT company, helped him run cable and do a whole bunch of stuff, hang TVs, work on computers on like Friday or usually because I was off Friday because I only work 4 days a week. So I work Friday and Saturday. And if he works on Sunday, sometimes I work Sunday as well, just to repay all my debt, pay off my student loans, paid off my condo. I had no debt. I had no debt whatsoever. And then I made the transition to be a financial advisor myself. So started with I had no idea, no where my clients were coming from. Just went out there and just did it.
Wow,
And
that's scary.
it was awful. It was awful because I didn't know because at the time, like health insurance, things that you need,
Hmm.
it was a what if and what was what were the solutions? And so yeah, that was definitely the first few years working as an independent advisor, not having a paycheck or a W-2. I wasn't for sure exactly how much I was supposed to pay in taxes and things like that. So I'd save everything that I sold or everything that I had coming in as an advisor. I'd save 30% of it no matter what. 30%. And I started just putting that away in an investment and just kept it no matter what. The first year came, I didn't owe any taxes, or I was making such money that I didn't, but I still saved 30%. And then that just became like a habit, saving that money out. So those goals change. And then you talk about then getting married, right? And having a family.
Yeah.
Those change now because before then, before getting married, all of my goals were very independently mine, right? It was just my goals in general. I didn't have to get together and have a family meeting and figure out what everybody else wanted to do.
There are goals.
Yeah. And so that's how that sort of changed. And then kids, figuring out goals with the kids and
Yeah, and you're about to have another kid,
yeah,
right? So
about to have another one. So this will be
congratulations.
four.
Yeah.
So it'll be crazy. So it's funny where I'm at, but the goals, I would say the goals now I might have slowed down a little bit, especially when it's talking to the real estate side of things. But I want to keep that going. And my wife also has the same hope of also expanding real estate because she sees the benefit in it,
Hmm.
but she also knows that if I get a call in the middle of the night or something's not right, then I've got to go take care of whatever property that is, right? So those goals now are included in our family and figuring out what family, how it affects the family and things like that. It's definitely different because I can't make decisions now solely myself. I have to include someone else, which is even better because it gives another perspective. Now, she might not have the same experiences that I've had, like growing up with a father that was in construction and things like that, but she has a different perspective that she can add to the conversation for us to help make an educated decision on.
Yeah, that's super valuable. And it's interesting how your mind shift changes when you start off as building wealth or making money, saving money, but then it goes into building a family and building a life.
Yeah.
It's a different mindset of saving money versus building a life.
Hmm.
I know that for me, that was a huge shift in mindset that happened after when I started thinking about building a life.
Right.
Like, what do I want my life to look like in 20 years? And what changes do I need to make now? What
Mm,
investments do I need to make now in all parts of my life so that
right.
I'll have the life I want in 20 years?
Right. Well, and it's and sometimes I don't know, were those are those major changes or those minor changes that you'd have to make to achieve what it is that you want to achieve?
Maybe some of both. I don't know. Not, I mean, for me, it didn't seem like it was forced changes or things that I was doing that I didn't necessarily want to do, or um, I would say a lot of little changes that add up to big changes.
Mm, yeah, I think sometimes I get caught up on, and my wife would tell the same story, but like always trying to save like income, like disposable income, these small things, but I'm forgetting like the experiences with a family.
Hmm.
Where do I want that to be like my legacy with the kids? Like we didn't do these things because Quentin's trying to save a dollar, right?
Right.
Obviously, the saving is trying to achieve a goal for that money to be repurposed somewhere, but realizing also that hey, the kids want these experiences. Or hey, like it's not all about the dollar, it's not all about just saving, but let's do these experiences too.
Right.
And sometimes I get sidetracked and I'm thinking it's all about like
You get
fame.
tunnel vision sometimes. That's where that other perspective comes in. It's where you have another perspective, and I think it's about balance, like most things. You still have your long-term vision of, yeah, you need to be saving money and making investments for your long-term vision, but you can balance that with spending some money now to enjoy the time you have now and let your kids have a good experience now. You don't want them to suffer and grow up not having good experiences,
Right.
obviously. So, yeah, that's obviously something to always think about.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I guess, yeah, we talked about how marriage and family has impacted your goals. That
Hmm.
pretty much covers that. I want to go back, glossed over it a little bit. I want to talk about when you were in Cincinnati Christian, how the biblical aspect of that impacted your life.
Sure. It was honestly a great opportunity just to see that before then, like I would do like Bible studies at my church, or I had a family that was in high school that built a lot into me. Scott and Nancy Mays, they were like super significant in my high school years to just build in me, especially to see what a biblical family look like. What did a good Christian home, what does that symbiosis look like? And I was basically able to learn from them. But then as I transitioned to Cincinnati Christian University, I had a lot of maybe biblical studies professors or just professors at the school that had a Christian worldview, maybe in doing business or looking at the world. And so it added even more of a perspective for me. How can the even when I was going through like teaching, how can the Bible or having a Christian worldview like benefit children's education, right? How can that add even more educational value to them? The truth of the honest is it does. I mean, you become more, you show people more grace. You show more, you have more empathy for people. You have a place in the people that might have been discarded. You try to bring them back because there's a redemption story in that. There's a redemption story in Christ, but there's also a redemption story in each and every one of us. Just because something might have went wrong in our life that might not have been great, or something that's that was unfortunate that had happened to us, there's always a redemption, and there's always can be brought back. And I think no matter if I go in and I look at someone's budget in today, and I go in and I talk to a family and they look like they're completely underwater, their credit scores in the garbage, they have no money, I do not sell the doom and gloom because I know that within every story there's a redemption. And so I feel like that's a lot of times when I go in and talk to people. I think a client once told, you bring a lot of hope to me. Even though this looks like there's no hope, you make it sound like it can be achieved and I have hope. I'm like, yeah, that's the point. You do have hope. You can't just shut it down. Like, what other options are there? And there's none. It's the hope of you knowing that you just have to do the little things, like you were saying. Sometimes you have small choices to make or large choices to make to go where you want to go. Sometimes they just have to make small choices that lead to a significant outcome and a significant result, changing their whole life around. So I would say that like having a biblical worldview is just the story of hope and the story of redemption. If we can't have that, then it it's all for naught. Then basically,
That's powerful.
yeah. So
Interesting. So, what kind of advice do you give some of your clients now as far as investing? I guess what kind of clients do you typically work with now?
yeah, honestly, we work with young professionals
Okay.
more so than not because we want to make sure that what they're wanting to do and what their future looks like is built into their financial plan. So, like you, if we have somebody that wants to do real estate, we try to set them up the best way possible for their goals. It might not necessarily be in investing in stocks or mutual funds or things like that, but maybe their plan is to invest in real estate. How can we help them achieve that goal? So everybody's story is
Sure,
different.
everyone's different,
Yeah.
right?
And so that's the main theme. We don't necessarily talk to people that don't want to talk to us, right? We don't, because we want someone to have a Damascus Road experience and realizing, hey, this is what I want to do and I want help to do it. If you look at some of the millionaires, billionaires in the United States, they all have someone to help them with finances. No matter what, they might be super smart in their field, super smart in real estate, they have someone to coach them up on certain things. And so we're just that, if you're looking at a table, we're someone just sitting there with them to help them make those decisions, maybe along with their tax advisor or a lawyer and things like that.
Hmm.
We're all working together to help make their story and their results achievable.
Help get them where they want to go. So that depending on where they want to go, you're going to give different advice based on that.
Exactly. Yeah, because there's a difference between like just giving sound generic financial advice,
Hmm.
right? Not having any inputs or having any information from the client, right? As opposed to like giving specific advice on their certain situation.
So, what kind of options do you normally talk about? So, obviously, we talked about the Roth IRA. There's traditional IRAs. There's 401ks. There's life insurance. There's real estate. What other kind of options are out there for people that don't know about these things?
Yeah, so I think especially for maybe the crowd that, you might be around, people always feel warm and fuzzy about real estate because it's a tangible thing.
Hmm.
They're like, "Oh yeah, it's a building. I own this." Some people just might not want to, they don't want the headache.
Right.
They don't want to be a landlord. They don't want that asset. They don't want, if someone calls them, they don't want to have to call the plumber. They don't want to have to spend that extra money. There are options to do that. There are mutual funds, there's REITs that they can get involved with, is still investing
Hmm.
in real estate, but that's a way for them to go down that alley without really having to buy a property themselves, right? So those are options, right? There's so many options out there, Vince, that it's honestly, that's one of the reasons I think most people just get scared and turned off by it, is because there's so much. Overwhelmed. It's like going to Jungle Gyms and you're just wanting to go and get a bottle of ketchup, but then you go in and see that there's 1,000 different bottles of ketchup. well, which one's better? Which one should I not use? Which one should I use? Which one should I not use? Are we going for affordability? Are we going for taste? Are we going for maybe do you want a spicy ketchup? I don't. So there's a lot of different options, and it's trying to narrow down really what that client wants and what they're wanting to achieve and finding the best fit for them.
Mhm.
Because I know we've talked before about you live in multi-unit, right? You own single family homes, you own different options like some people just maybe will focus on one niche, right? They'll focus on single family homes or they'll focus on multi units. Or I know we've talked about a bit before off camera about assisted living things.
Hmm.
Depending on what that person wants, there's a lot of different options for them to choose on investing and what is the best options. And it's really looking at their full financial picture to figure out how their goals fit into each particular product, because you might find out that they want to retire early. They want to retire before 59 and a half. If you end up putting your money in a 401k or an IRA, you have to pay a penalty if you take that money out before 59 and a half.
Right.
So is that the best option? It might be, it might not be.
That was one thing that I always had struggles with when I was working as an engineer. I had a 401k and I had a 6% match, which is pretty good. So I always did the 6% match, but I was always hesitant to put much more money into that because I knew I wasn't going to be able to touch it until I was 59 and a half.
Hmm.
And I was like, I want to be able to do something with this money before I'm 59 and a half. And at the time, I didn't know anything about this thing called a solo
Hmm.
401k, which is what I have now. I rolled all that into a solo 401k, and now I can actually take that money and use it for things within that solo 401k that can generate more of a return. So I wish I had put more into that so I
Hmm.
have more to work with now. But still glad I put in what I did and got the 6% match and had a lot of appreciation over the 13 years I was an engineer.
Yeah. That's the thing is you just didn't know.
I
Like
didn't.
you
Yeah.
didn't know. And a lot of the times when you call in to like 401k providers, they just are giving you information about the plan and
Yeah.
they're not giving advice per se.
Right. And it was just invested in index funds
Hmm.
or whatever, mutual funds, and I didn't even know anything about it. I just knew that the balance generally went up every year, and I just kept on contributing. And but no, I didn't know if there was ways to take that money and invest it in other things like real estate.
Right.
And now I know there is a way to do that.
Yeah, no, and that's it all gets back to learning, right?
Hmm.
And when we talk, and like I said before, it's all about the details. Like investing as a broad sort of scope of things, it involves so much. And all the little details is really where you find the minutia and you say, this is what you want, this is how you can do it with this term investing. And you found that out.
What other areas in life do you invest in besides financially? Like what other things do you think are important to invest in your life?
Yeah. So I would definitely say, like, spiritually for myself and my family. So I'm also an associate minister at a church here in Cincinnati, New Burlington Church of Christ, and the congregation there and just the people. It's a smaller church, but I want to invest in their lives and invest in people because I really feel like that's a mission statement just for like me, being able to just love on people and just come at them where they are and meet them where they're at and just going back to giving them hope and giving that redemption and know that it's okay. It's fine. You don't have to worry about as much as you hold on your shoulders because I feel like a lot of us walk around with just anxiety and just pressure to either perform or be heard or do the things that people want us to do, right? Those expectations. And that's I think that just in our society today and in culture, it's putting way too much pressure on people instead of just like living your lives, taking each moment as it comes to you and just enjoying those moments. So I would say investing personally into the people around you, but also having a spiritual sort of cornerstone for me is a very big deal. Because even for me and my family, I want my kids to also pick that up as well. I want them to understand that why does dad care about the other people at church or why do we spend so much time at church or why are we doing these things? It's because there's something bigger than each and every single one of us and all together we're all connected in that way.
So what does that look like for you as far as investing in your spirituality? What does that feel like to you?
Yeah, for us, we have a Bible study that we go to. We usually, Kristen and I, we read the Bible before we go to bed at night. So we read, it's like a reading plan and it's on an app and we usually play it and then it reads through it.
Okay.
And for us, that's a way to do that. And I also, usually when I go to work, I'll read a chapter of, it's a spiritual book. It's a Dallas Willard book that I'll read a chapter here and there from as well. It's about spiritual discipline and things like that. So reading scripture, being involved, but doing that collectively with my wife so that we are growing at the same capacity
Mm.
together, as opposed to that sort of unequal growth or unyoked growth where maybe she's growing spiritually, then I'm lagging back late.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
got to be important to be on the same page that way with your wife. I think would be super. It would be challenging if you're not on the same page there. I
yeah,
feel like.
yeah, for sure. And I think that it goes into a lot of like ideologies too, like just going out and you're midday just trying to, if you're both completely on separate like planets when it's talking about those things, it just would be hard
Yeah,
culturally together. So we're trying to raise the kids as best we can with sort of a Christian upbringing to serve others, to help each other, to help those in need, and be kind to everyone we meet, and just show those the love. So
that's great.
yeah, so yeah,
Quentin, thanks so much for coming in, man. I think that
yeah.
was a great story. I think a lot of people were going to get a lot out of that. And how can people reach out to you if they have more questions?
Yeah, you can definitely look us up at Wealthwise Financial Group, located in Cincinnati. We've got a website, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. Love to talk to anybody. And I think you know that. And I appreciate you inviting me to come on and just chat. So
It was
it's been
fun.
great. So yeah,
It was
thank
fun.
you.
And I appreciate you. I appreciate your friendship, and I'm just excited to see how you and your family grow, and just to be a part of that in the future.
Awesome. Thanks, Vince.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.